Hey everybody, waiting for next year.com podcast. I'm going to dial up Jake Burns in just a minute. We're going to talk about all the Cleveland Browns draft picks, but I want to tell you about our sponsor, Minuteman Tickets. That's the best way to get tickets for any event that you want to go to, minutemantickets.com. But the best way to deal with them is to call them on the phone. You could save yourself some money on fees. You can talk to a real live person who's going to help you out. Having that human contact really helps in this day and age, especially when it's somebody who actually cares about whether you go to the event and how much you're paying for the tickets. And we've all logged onto those sites and had surprises at the end when you go and you see all the fees and everything. So MinutemanTickets.com, check out the tickets that you're looking for, then give Scott or Matt a call at 614-943-3000, 614-943-3000. Tell them that Waiting for Next Year sent you. Tell them that I sent you. MinutemanTickets.com. All right, here's Jake Burns.
Waiting for next year.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Three Sports Podcast. I am Ben Axelrod from WKYC.com. He is Craig Lindell from Waiting for Next Year. We talked about the Cavs last week, and like we said, this week we're going to break down some of the Browns offseason. Craig, it's been a while since we've talked Browns. I can't even remember if we talked about Tyrod Taylor and Jar. You know what? I think that's the last podcast we did prior to last week. Is we broke down the Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry acquisitions.
I'm really happy that we didn't spend a whole bunch of time doing too much pre-draft stuff, because
I couldn't have done it.
I got so burned out a few years back, not when the Browns signed RG3, but when that draft was taking place with Andrew Luck and RG3. And I wrote probably 5, 6, 7 posts Waiting for Next Year about RG3. And I talked and then it never came to pass. He never ended up in a Browns jersey. And so all this I'd rather react after the things happen than, I complained and worried about Josh Allen a bunch on Twitter. But I'm glad I didn't spend a lot of time talking on a podcast or writing a bunch of posts about why the Browns shouldn't draft Josh Allen. Although I correctly predicted, not in the right draft slot, I correctly predicted that he would extend the quarterback curse or transfer the quarterback curse from Cleveland to Buffalo, and they did. They took him.
Yeah, when I look back on the process leading up to this draft, Josh Allen will certainly stand out because of all of the calories everybody burned, complaining about him and worrying about him and spending sleepless nights thinking about him and his 55% completion percentage. But I am the same way, and a little background on me, I used to be an NFL draft junkie, dating back to 2004, that draft where the Browns got Kellen Winslow, who actually is who I wanted them to pick in that draft. I was 16 years old, but I just love the NFL draft. I always made a point to make a big event out of it and watch it with my friends or my dad and my brother and all of that. And back in 2014, I took 2 days off of work just to digest all of the sports talk radio, and that was the Johnny draft and all of that. I think the Sashi Brown era broke me, though, especially the 2016 draft, where the Browns had the 2 pick and there was all that talent at the top and the quarterbacks and all of that, and then they trade back to 15 and take a wide receiver we never even, I don't think I had even thought about for a sliver of a second in the 3 months prior. So to me, this was one of the more enjoyable draft experiences I've had, because I was aware of the players. I know about the quarterbacks. I knew about most of the players in this draft. But other than, occasionally trolling Browns fans with Josh Allen and Carson Wentz comparisons and all of that stuff, I pretty much stayed out of it. And there wasn't even a guy, gun to head, I probably would have picked Sam Darnold 1. But there wasn't a guy who I was in love with at really 1 or 4. I was kind of adamant I didn't want them to trade back from 4. But I had no hard opinions going into this thing. But then come draft day, like I just snorted all of the draft coverage. Like I just inhaled it all, just took it all in. And that to me was a much more enjoyable experience than like you said, being in it for the long haul and, hitching your wagon to a quarterback back at the combine and riding him out until now.
Yeah, it's been kind of enlightening for me. Covering drafts and covering the Browns over the years, just to realize how little I know, and even the people who are connected, like, can only report 10% of what they're hearing. And so you're better off reacting after the fact. And now we know it's Baker Mayfield. Now we know it's Denzel Ward. And I feel like I'm well equipped based on my experience covering the Browns to talk about who they ended up drafting and what some of the risk factors are and maybe some of the warning bells that go off in my head when they draft Denzel Ward. So, I mean, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, we should probably start with Baker.
Okay. So, I mean, when it all came down, and I'm with you, I probably would have taken Darnold, but they didn't. We don't know that much, and they take Mayfield. So how are you feeling now?
I guess I would say, for somebody who claims I didn't have any fast and hard opinions heading into the draft, like the two quarterbacks I just really didn't want were Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield. Like those were the two guys who I would just rather another team, because to me they're both kind of outliers, right? And Josh Allen in the sense of his inaccuracy and lack of production in college, and Baker Mayfield obviously with his height and to a lesser degree his style of play, although I know people argue that he's much more of a traditional passer than he gets credit for. But I don't know, to me, the Browns had the one pick. Sam Darnold was the number one guy heading into the season. He didn't seem to necessarily do anything to lose that. I know people were concerned about his turnovers. Sam Darnold would have been my pick. Obviously, I think there's some stuff there with Josh Rosen that he was never even seriously considered. And so, yeah, I mean, I would have gone Darnold, and they went Mayfield, and all this stuff that is kind of leaked out in the days after about how, most of the NFL teams, or at least half a dozen, had Baker Mayfield as their top quarterback. I guess that makes me feel better. But especially because I know or allegedly he's not going to be the starter heading into this season. I'm kind of just in wait and see mode with him. I mean, there's some stuff I still really have my doubts about with him, but to me, I'm just, I don't know. I'm not even overly invested in Baker Mayfield at this point, even though he's finally the number one pick at quarterback. I'm in wait and see mode with him. It wouldn't have been my pick, but it's the pick they made, and what are you going to do?
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. I also feel much better about the Baker Mayfield pick after seeing, of all things, and I'm shocked that I'm even saying this, but his behind the scenes kind of documentary style thing that he produced.
This is interesting. We disagree here. Go on.
That actually made me feel better about that guy, because while I don't think he's like this perfect guy, I don't love him. At the same time, he proved to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is not Johnny Manziel. He probably has other kinds of issues and things that he needs to make sure don't get. He doesn't get over his skis, I guess is the way I would put it. But like, there are other concerns that I read about or people had that were totally allayed by that video.
See, my concern was never Johnny, though. Because Johnny is
Fair.
a admitted, substance abuser and drug addict, or was a drug addict. I don't know how to term it, PC anymore. More
maybe
than that,
beat his girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, he is a guy who had like serious issues beyond an alcohol-related arrest, which he had with a fake ID or a fight or something at College Station. But it's just more the maturity for me with Baker Mayfield, and even watching that Behind Baker series, it didn't alleviate any of my concerns. Like there was some stuff, and this is actually interesting because maybe it's just me like getting old, and maybe me being a curmudgeon and being like, oh, because he is very much a millennial. But a couple of things stood out to me in that. One was when after they lost to Georgia in the Rose Bowl, he told his family that he was going to stay out in L.A. and train there. And both his mom and his brother expressed concern about him staying out in LA. And even his brother made some comment that after a few days, he had to talk to Baker about the people he was hanging out with and that it wasn't the right thing to do and the right route to go down. The fact that was included in, what was seemingly a puff piece of a documentary, I thought that was interesting. And then to a lesser degree, the whole thing at the combine when he's at the NFL combine and he's making a big deal about working out in Adidas cleats because he wants to get Nike's attention. Like, I know that goes on, I get all of that, but he seems just like a little too invested in it for my liking. And then there was something about where Brett Favre's agent called him and was trying to recruit him and asked him about Bob Stoops recruiting him to Oklahoma, and Baker said he hung up on him because he didn't know he had been a walk-on or whatever. I get it. And I know this is kind of the image that Baker Mayfield is going for, but it would just be nice to finally have a quarterback who's not going for an image. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure that exists. I understand. I'm not here to
So I'm just getting old.
I know. I'm not here to disagree with anything you said, but in an age where I've come to grips with LeBron's embarrassing Instagram stories where he raps into the camera, whatever. Let's see how he plays. I don't think it's that out of the ordinary compared to everybody else.
But you weren't in on Baker heading into this. I remember that was one conversation pre-draft we did have. So are you just at peace with it? Have you talked yourself into it? I guess how have you processed the because it came out of nowhere too. That's the other thing is it was really a couple of days before, and it all seemed like a smokescreen up until they turned in the card.
Well, this is one of the things that one of the comparisons to Johnny Manziel that actually does make sense. As a Browns fan, I was all in on Johnny Manziel, the player, and I said, "Hey, look, I know that I can't do the background checks. I can't vouch for him as a citizen, but the tape, and I'll stand by it to this day. The tape as a player." I was fine with Johnny Manziel, and I think that he could have been successful with the right coaching and the right offensive system. I think he had the competitive fire and the ability to be a really great or a really solid, successful NFL quarterback. I feel very similar to Baker Mayfield. The concerns that I had about Baker Mayfield had nothing to do with his college career or his college tape or his ability to make all the throws or his, all these kinds of things. It was all the things that I couldn't validate from the outside looking in. And so I wasn't on board or off board with Baker Mayfield. Just as a player, based on the tape, I would be excited about Baker Mayfield, and you have to trust John Dorsey and his crew to do all the kind of homework that you can't do from the outside looking in.
I think one thing too that to me,
is that not the ultimate hedge, by the way?
No, that's kind of but that's what fans do during draft season, right? It's everybody's all in on Carson Wentz, and then they trade away the pick, and you find reasons why they shouldn't have taken Carson Wentz in the first place.
They got a lot of value.
Yeah, they got a lot of value, and the jury's still out on some of those players. And let's get a full season of health from Corey Coleman. But
see, Deshaun Watson got hurt. They didn't need that guy.
Yeah, they knew he had 2 bad ACLs. The other thing though that. It's hard for me to even get mad. I'm not mad. I'm not even. I just have questions about is nothing they did this offseason pointed to Baker Mayfield. In terms of signing Tyrod Taylor, or trading for Tyrod Taylor, especially that, and not only that, but signing Drew Stanton to a 2-year contract. That quarterback room does not make a lot of sense right now. And I wonder. I just wonder what happens if they are 2-6 heading into November. Do they have to play Baker Mayfield now? And if so, then why did you even acquire Tyrod Taylor?
I think it makes more sense now because I think Tyrod Taylor actually, even though Baker Mayfield will never make plays with his feet the way Tyrod Taylor does, I think you can the offense doesn't have to change that much between Tyrod and Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, no, that part certainly makes sense. But of the four quarterbacks who were considered, Baker Mayfield, it seemed like him and Josh Rosen are probably the two guys ready to play right away. Like Baker Mayfield's 23 years old. I don't like Sam Darnold. If they would have picked Sam Darnold, we would have known they were stashing him away third string all season. He was not going to play a snap. It was going to be a pure redshirt year, which doesn't happen often in the NFL, but it still does on occasion. And that would be the plan because Sam Darnold was 20 years old. Baker Mayfield seems like, and it's funny to say, about a 23-year-old, but he seems like, he's ready to play. He's a guy who should be out there on the field. And to me, I guess Tyrod's here so that they can win a game in September and Hugh can keep his job, which I'm not actually, against, because we saw last season how much a season can go off the rails if you don't get one of those early wins. But it's just that their plan for this offseason, what they did in trades and free agency and all of that all made sense to me. But then to me, the draft didn't necessarily follow the same plan.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Does that bring us to Denzel Ward?
I believe it does. Yeah, that's I'm hedging too. I'm in wait and see mode with Baker. I don't want to put any tweets out there that get thrown back in my face if he winds up being Drew Brees. But
and we all should be in wait and see mode. Right. Although our friend Anthony Lima is pretty much anti Baker Mayfield at this point still.
Yeah, and that's Lima sticks to his guns. Lima has takes, and he has takes. He does. He very much has takes.
So let me give you my Denzel Ward take.
Yes,
I like Denzel Ward. I think it's great that the Browns picked the number one corner. I'm confused with the talk around it coming from the Browns front office that it came down to need as opposed to best player available, where I think there's some doubt in my mind that Denzel Ward actually rated higher than Chubb, and that they ended up choosing him because they were satisfied with Agba. And that bothers me extensively if that's the case, because you would never let the existence of Emmanuel Agba keep you from drafting the next great pass rusher if it's better than the next great corner.
I think analytics people would actually disagree with you. They say that a lockdown corner is more valuable than a pass rusher. It's hard for me to speak honestly about Denzel Ward because I am very much biased that they finally took a Buckeye in the first round. And I'm not even, as I know sometimes I get painted as an Ohio State homer, and maybe I'm more of one than I give myself credit for, but I'm not going to complain about them taking a Buckeye ever. It's just, I've never seen it. So I'm excited for it.
And I'm not complaining either. I'm nervous about the process.
I think I understand the process in the sense that, and I see what you're saying, and this kind of goes against it, that you wouldn't let Agba, you wouldn't let anybody on this roster at this point, affect who you're drafting. And maybe that was even the thought process with Tyrod Taylor and Baker Mayfield. I do understand, though, the thought process that this roster has so few quality players still. And the fact that two of the quality players are already defensive ends. It was, Chubb was being linked to the Browns dating back to the Combine. It was always hard for me to envision that happening just because they have Garrett and Agba. It's not just, Agba, it's Garrett too, to a degree, that you just took a defensive end first overall a year ago. And I don't think the John Dorsey or anyone in this regime should be making decisions based off of what's already there or what Sashi Brown did a year ago. But I do understand the logic, I guess, that this roster is basically a blank slate, and the one position where it's not a blank slate is defensive end. And so if you're going to spend a valuable asset like the number 4 pick, I understand if you even have it close, factoring need a little bit more there.
No, I get it. And I agree with that.
I will say this too. One thing about the Ward pick I didn't like, though, is in this factors in Baker too. I don't like the fact that they had the number 1 and the number 4 pick, and they seem to surprise people with both picks.
Yes, that's first and foremost. I agree with that. And then the thing that really hit me was when Peter King was talking to Dorsey, and Dorsey pulls out his phone and dials up Greg Williams.
Oh no!
I didn't
see this.
I don't want. And he's, Greg Williams is saying, yeah, I need the lockdown corner. I don't want Greg Williams unduly influencing the draft, because chances are he's not going to be around long enough to see it all. That's so anyway, and I'm sure Dorsey didn't just I'm sure that wasn't the only factor, but anyway, that was part of my thing.
I mean, it seems like the coaching staff was left in the dark about a lot of this draft.
Yes.
If you read the reporting with Baker and all of that, it seems like he was putting on it. It's interesting that John Dorsey allegedly didn't tell Hugh until 2 days before the draft, and that's when all the Baker buzz started building. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, have you watched any of the Behind the Browns special on Facebook, the series they're doing? Yeah, I've seen the clips on Twitter and stuff. Did you see the one where Baker meets Greg Williams?
No.
Oh, God. Yeah, they're taking Baker Mayfield through the building, and he meets Greg Williams, and Hugh says something to the effect of, Greg, what's that catchphrase you have? And Greg gives Baker a come get some. like how it's not the lack of self-awareness in that building sometimes is just astonishing.
Yeah, I think people are generally just awkward. And the fact that we are now seeing that they're just the awkward people we work with in our offices, and whatever. They have weird water cooler conversations, and people are I ran to Greg in the workout room. It was a weird dude.
Yeah, he's a really weird dude. Speaking of dudes, how great is John Dorsey though?
Oh, he is a cartoon of himself in the best possible ways. I love it.
Regardless of what he does with this roster and the picks and all of that, he is incredible. He is.
I can't wait to start working on my impression of him. Hey there, buddy boy.
Oh my! The buddy boy. It has already caught on as a meme.
It's so great.
Did you see Ken Carmen's tweet when they made the trade while Dorsey was at the Indians game? Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's that call because I was driving down to Indianapolis actually for Game 6 the day after the draft, and I was listening to KNR. One of the few times I'll listen to KNR is during draft season and especially the day after the draft, and they played that call to Baker Mayfield, the John Dorsey call to Baker Mayfield to let him know that he was going to be the number 1 pick. They probably played it 20 times, and you find something different in it every time, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's like a Tarantino flick.
Yeah, and the fact that he wears the same sweater every day and the same sweatshirt and all of that, it's just he is after 2 years of spreadsheets running this franchise, he is very much a football guy, and it is refreshing to see.
Yes, he's the football lifer. He's the deeply religious. He goes to mass every day. He wears the same sweatshirt. He's got these kind of weird country boy mannerisms. He's he is the football guy cartoon all the way along. He's actually
not the biggest football guy in football right now. Gettleman on the Giants. He has kind of taken the football guy throne. Did you see the quote he had about teams trying to trade up to 2 and offering him? He had some quote, and while he was doing this, keep in mind he was pantomiming a guy typing at a computer to kind of mock the analytics nerds, and was saying teams try to call you up for the number 2 pick and are offering you a bag of donuts, a pretzel, and a hot dog, and I hang up on them and tell them don't waste my time. And he's saying they're pantomiming typing with Pat Shurmur next to him. It was the quintessential football guy moment. I'm glad football guys are making a comeback in 2018.
But I don't think that they're just living in these like isolation chambers where analytics guys are not getting any run. I think it's all being married together now.
Oh, very much so. And actually, this will transition us to the next the rest of the Browns draft. John Dorsey had a very analytics friendly draft. Pro Football Focus loved the Browns draft. Like, we joke about John Dorsey being a football guy and stuff, but he made that quote about being 85% Braves, which is, the see what you see with your eyes scouting, and 15% Oakland A's, which is the analytics. This seemed much closer to like a 60-40 split. This seemed like a very analytics friendly draft. And I'm not saying that with an opinion on it one way or another, but I do think if you are in favor of analytics in football, this is the way to do it, not what the Browns were doing the last 2 years.
No, yeah, and to your point, and maybe this actually makes an argument against my own bias against best player available, but the Browns, this group at the top of the Browns actually seems like they know how to build a team that can win football games and compete in all phases of the game, as opposed to just collecting talent and because that's one of the big complaints I've had over the years is that, even when the Browns collected talent, there was no semblance of a plan to use them to win football games on Sundays. Right.
Yeah, and they have Dorsey, they have Wolf, they have Highsmith. I mean, they have quote unquote football guys, but D. Podesta's still on the payroll. Andrew Berry, who people always point to as one of the architects
guy.
of. Yeah, Harvard guy. I mean, they still have guys from the Sashi era. They just don't have Sashi. So, and it's not like they're paying D. Podesta peanuts either. Like, I think his voice is being heard. Although I keep waiting to wake up one day and hear he's resigned.
I thought he was going to be gone. I really did. And the fact that he's still there, we stopped hearing those rumors that he was going to be gone. Maybe he had issues with Sashi too. Who knows?
Yeah. And I've actually heard more that he's in Cleveland more than he was and all of that. So, who knows?
He's a football guy too. He played football. He was probably like, man, we need more football guys here.
Well, he's worked in the, he's worked in the NFL now for like 3 years. Like at a certain point, one of us. The rest of the Browns draft, what stands out to you?
I think that a lot of the criticism of the Browns for taking Antonio Callaway is Antonio Callaway, the receiver. I think that's a big risk. It's a big risk, and I think it's dangerous precedent to be able to talk yourself into these things if he ends up being a good player, because there's a lot of evidence that he might not be a good person. And you got to have some priorities in life. And my priorities in life are beyond just winning football games. Obviously, I'm a Browns fan. It's the way things go. But I get taking gambles. I get taking gambles on guys like Josh Gordon, who presumably only hurt themselves and not other people. But when you start straying into territory where a guy might have hurt other people, I might start to have some issues.
Yeah, it is always. Yeah, it's weird because I always try to, say, well, I don't go to football for my morals, and I don't need, the players I watch on Sunday to be role models for me. And to a degree, I believe that. But yeah, I mean, I remember, watching those old Bengals teams and maybe it's because they were playing again. They were usually beating the Browns. But I was like, how as a fan, how do you go out and buy a Joe Mixon jersey? How do you, how do you support some of these guys? And yeah, it's.
But I also do believe, and Bomani Jones talks about this a lot, I do believe that people can change and get better, and I do want to leave room in this world for people to change and get better, and maybe the Browns have the process in place, and maybe this kid has woken up. I don't know, and we'll find out, but to tell you I'm thinking about it makes me nervous.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think, what stands out about, he was kind of the signature player of the rest of the Browns draft, even though they had 4 picks ahead of him. But yeah, it's going to be it's going to be interesting if he flames out, and it's going to be interesting if he's good. From a football standpoint, like, people think he might have been the best wide receiver in this draft, and that he, I think he entered the season as a first round pick or projected first round pick. And if Josh Gordon, that to me is though the other thing, right? Is now it's, when you talk about the Browns receivers, you're saying, well, now if Josh Gordon can stay out of trouble, and if Antonio Callaway can get on the field, like, it's a lot of ifs. And, just following sports as long as we have, a lot, the ifs are kind of a 50-50 proposition.
So to your other question though, I think I like the second round. I'm not sold on any of these guys. I'd be lying if I said I did a deep study of the offensive line class, and more than just like a YouTube study of the running backs. Because let's be honest, watching running back tape is actually more fun than watching offensive line tape. But I think it makes some sense. I like the fact that the Browns are actually piling up some talent at running back, despite how it impacts Duke Johnson's psyche on Twitter.
Yeah, I know Duke Johnson is good. I don't know how good he is.
Yeah, get a hold of yourselves. And
I'm not. We know he's not a guy who should be touching the ball 25 times a game. Like, we know he probably can't handle that. We know he's gonna catch some balls. I don't know if Duke Johnson, and I know the touches weren't there last year and all of that, but it's also hard to project out touches because who knows what you're doing if you're more worn down and all of that. All I'm saying is, a lot of Browns fans seem like they're getting ready to fit Duke Johnson's, gold jacket for Canton. And I'm just, pump the brakes just a second.
Yes.
No, he's a guy. I've been dying to show that take, but Duke Johnson's a guy. A lot of teams have Duke Johnsons.
And Duke Johnson is a solid guy, but he's like a B+.
Yeah.
He's not and maybe he'll be more. There's still time, but yeah, he's a B+.
Yeah, and that's fine. This team needs B+, but yeah, it's very clear, between Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb. I mean, one, you can't have too many good running backs, really. Like, you can't. You'll find ways to get the guys carries if you need to, and some of that might come down to the play calling. Although Todd Haley seems like he's done a pretty good job of it throughout his career. So I'm not. Yeah, Nick Chubb. I liked the Chubb pick because that seemed like a guy they should have taken there, right? Like, you knew running back was a pretty big need still. Chubb was one of the best running backs left on the board, and they took him. The Nevada offensive lineman, that's interesting because they took him 33rd, right?
Austin Corbett.
And, you take a guy 33rd, like, I'm guessing they see him as the potential heir to Joe Thomas.
I actually think he's going to end up being Nick. I think he's going to be Mitchell Schwartz. I think he's going to end up at right tackle. I think he's going to be very good. And I think that a lot of Browns fans, because we've had the best left tackle in the game for so long, and maybe one of the best left tackles in history, we've not realized that left tackle isn't quite as important as it was back when Joe Thomas was drafted. It's like center in the NBA. We're playing a lot of positionless football. No, I just don't think left tackle is the all be all end all that it was for so long when Joe Thomas was holding it down for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's a luxury because I think that would probably be understating it a little too much. But there are teams that piece together the left tackle position. Good teams, right? Like, it's not a requirement to have a franchise left tackle. And obviously we've seen, it guarantees nothing either.
And it's like baseball with the shift. Like, the game's changed. Shortstop and second base and range and all this stuff. Like, you don't need a rangeful shortstop as much as you used to. So you better get one that can hit because your shift is going to conquer a lot of this stuff. We have so many advanced analytics and obviously you need a good football player. You want as many good football players at every position as possible. But the idea that you need this high price, top of the roster franchise left tackle, it's just not true anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The one thing though that makes me think he will be a left tackle is they paid Chris Hubbard from the Steelers. They paid him like starter money, and it seemed everybody seems to be on the same page that he is this team's starting right tackle. So maybe it's a deal where they feel like they have, factoring in Sean Coleman, they feel like they need 3 starting caliber tackles, and Corbett will start this season as, kind of the swing guy and the 6th offensive lineman. And from there, they'll find a position.
But it wouldn't be so bad if he doesn't have to play until week 5 or week 6.
Yeah. I mean, Lord, like, injuries happen. Like, Sean Coleman is far from a proven product. Like, it was, I thought, obviously, with Joe Thomas retiring, tackle was a glaring need on this roster. They signed another, they signed depth guys too, in addition to Hubbard. I think, it might be one of those things where they're just going to throw out as many flyers as they can afford to, and hope that they come out of this season with, some semblance of who their starting tackles are moving forward.
Well, and Browns fans let themselves get all in a bunch over the failed picks of the past, and the idea that they drafted Cam Erving and didn't have a specific position for him is now coloring the fact that they drafted this other guy. And the idea is that Cam Erving was just he was a bad football player,
right?
So everything's fine as long as this is a good football player.
Yeah, it's been something that's been interesting to me over these last couple of weeks, and maybe this is something I've just caught onto with, the new CBA, although I guess it's not all that new, but ever since they put the rookie scale in place and you have that decision to make of picking up a guy's 5th-year option, it's been really fascinating to see, Cam Erving obviously get his option declined. Danny Shelton get his option declined. The Browns picked up Demarius Randall, the safety they traded for from the Packers. They picked up his option. And to me, that's been kind of an interesting because they have to make the decision after the 3rd year. It's been interesting to see now, because they say it takes 3 years or so to judge a draft. At least as far as first rounders, it's kind of been a litmus test here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that just stood out to me because I saw both Cam and Danny Shelton had their options declined by their new teams. But
and I think Danny Shelton's going to earn another contract and probably a pretty good one. I believe in Danny Shelton, and as a player, I think it was a bad spot. And in much the same way that Jabal Sheard has had a solid NFL career.
Yeah, it was a bad spot and probably a worse time. He couldn't. Those 2015 draft picks really, whether they were first round or not, factoring even Duke Johnson, like they couldn't have come to the Browns at a worse time between that 2015 season and then obviously the 2 that followed. So we'll see. Anything else about the? It's hard for me to get into day 3 of the draft anymore.
Yeah, I don't really do it either. I'm very happy. Waiting for next year has guys who like to write up those picks.
Yeah. I know they took a defensive end from Miami who is also a record producer.
Yeah, that's a really cool story.
Chad Thomas.
I don't know how much it impacts football, but he's a big dude.
Yeah. They seem to think he's like a run stuffer type, so we'll see. Coming out of this draft, you feel better about the Browns? Feel about the same? Where is your optimism with the Cleveland Browns?
Oh, I think it's about the same. My optimism mostly relies on Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry right now.
Yeah.
And so everything else is just a bonus. If they can, I think Nick Chubb is going to turn Carlos Hyde into Ben Tate.
Yeah, he could
in a lot of ways. So and that's not a bad thing. And I like Carlos Hyde. I think that it'll render him relatively useless potentially, and that's a good thing. And that's really what this comes down to is the Browns got better in the secondary for sure. They got a guy who could potentially be their starting quarterback, and they don't have to play him right away. That was the Tyrod Taylor thing. And they undeniably got better at receiver with Jarvis Landry. So everything else feels like a bonus. I think the plus minus for wins this year is probably 6. Because
I think it's 5.5 in Vegas.
Because I'm an optimist, I'll take the over. But I think 6 is the right, 5.5 or 6 is the right number.
Yeah, it's interesting because for as many picks as they had, like Denzel Ward's probably the only starter they drafted, at least heading into 2018.
Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, potentially Nick Chubb. I'm at where you're at. It sounds like I came out of that draft and I was thinking, it was a draft. It was fine. And the whole thing hinges on what Baker Mayfield turns into, right?
Yeah.
Like that's going to determine what this long-term draft grade is, because if he's a bust, then none of this will matter. And if he's a franchise quarterback, it changes everything. And it seems like there's nowhere in between with him. So
I think we're all in a much healthier place where we're all just like, well, prove it. Let's see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good place to be, and that'll kind of lead me to my final point. But that was one thing, and I tweeted it because I've never felt this way about the Browns, and I was like, I liked what they did in free agency and trades more than I did in the draft. And that's not to say I didn't like the draft, but I am looking at 2018 and how this team can win football games, and I think what they did in trades and in the draft, at the very least, improved their chances of doing that. And so it is, after at least 2 years, and you could even argue it extends beyond the last 2 years of judging this team on anything but wins and losses, I am ready to judge this team on wins and losses. And even though, they have the lowest of bars and they're coming off 0-16, I'm going to judge this team off of wins and losses. And I think that's I'm tired of doing it any other way, quite frankly. So
yeah, wins and losses, and more specifically division wins. But I'm in.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. So sounds like we're on the same page. Let's try to do this a little more regularly moving forward. What do you say?
Maybe we'll even talk about the Indians someday. Who knows?
Let's not get carried away. But that's going to do it for today's 3 Sports podcast. For Craig Lindahl from Waiting for Next Year, I'm Ben Axelrod at WKYC. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend. Maybe we'll be back with you next week, breaking down all the latest in Cleveland sports. Thanks for listening, guys.